Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dark Rhiino Security Confidential. Today, we are honored to have George Kamide join us. He is a fantastic person, and he's a podcast host. Actually, he hosts two podcasts, First Watch and Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks, which we'll talk about that a little bit. But, he's currently a senior director at Safeguard Cyber. But what's really interesting is that he was once an anthropologist, believe it or not, a rock climbing instructor, a wedding photographer, and a creative writer. And now he's in cybersecurity, which is really kind of cool, that we get such great, varied diversity into the profession. He's also an advocate for greater representation in the information security space. He sits on the advisory board for Vision and Voice, a community dedicated to lifting women into cybersecurity positions. He, of course, has briefed U.S. Cyber Command and the Congressional Cyber Caucus, so we're honored to have him. Thank you so much for joining us, George.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
See, I'm sure you're bored of it because I think you've been on a couple podcasts, but for our listeners who don't know you, give us your origin story here a little bit. Most people want to become rock climbing instructors or anthropologists or wedding photographers, and you went the other way. So
yeah, that's a fair question. And it's fair to say that it was a circuitous route into cyber. I will also say, as somebody who has interviewed a lot of people in cybersecurity, I have found that very few of them have a linear path. Like that there's this imagined path that goes from IT help desk all the way into security engineer and up to CISO, but that has not been the case. So for myself, I am intimately interested in people. And I think that's why anthropology was so attractive to me. It helped give me a frame to understand different cultures. I'm a product of multiple cultures. Awesome. And it helped me understand people as inhabiting a universe, not just customs or language or, how they dress, how they talk. And then I got into writing while I was doing the things like rock climbing and taking wedding photography. And then writing has always been a part of my life. Tech has always been a part of my life. The son of immigrant parents who paid for me to get coding classes at 7. They spent a lot of money they didn't have on like a 386 computer when I was a kid. And
wow.
I
remember those. That dates you a little bit.
Yeah, I learned learned BASIC and could functionally type by 9, and that was them investing in what they saw as the future, right? And then I remember in 1994, my dad dropped a pile of books on the table, and it was all HTML, and he was like, "You need to learn this." I mean, he saw it, and so I played around with that. I did some web design. I think I never thought that I was like a tech person, but I was sort of tech adjacent. But then the writing led into marketing. I like to joke. So I guess it's half joking because it's also true that creative people end up in marketing because they need health insurance. And so I was working for a big agency doing largely B2B marketing.
Okay.
And I happened to start working for a cybersecurity startup because I moved laterally from doing social media security strategies to a company that was doing a lot of work in securing companies against risks in social media and now subsequently other communication channels, which is at Safeguard Cyber. So that felt like a good move. And then I've told people before, I think a lot of people are intimidated by cyber, but it's very welcoming, especially if you're curious. And I think it's very hard to get far in cyber if you're not curious. I mean, the tech is always changing, the risks are always changing. And I think it's very rewarding and it's been very welcoming.
That's fantastic. And I think for our audience listening, it gives them a little bit of insight. Again, trying to break into cyber, you really took a zigzaggy path there, but you can absolutely make it in if that's what you want to do, right? And you don't have to be a super technologist to make it happen initially. Find a path and carve at it and go for it. Now, you briefed U.S. Cyber Command. Can I ask what that was about?
Yeah. So I think, as you said, if you have a path. So yes, ostensibly I entered cybersecurity as somebody working in marketing, but at the time we had a lot of data on, and this was around 2018. We had a lot of data on Twitter bots that were being controlled by Russia, and we could see within our system certain things. And I took essentially the anthropology of that schema. Like you could study them, you could study behaviors, you could begin to catalog them. And so, part of marketing in cyber is to put out thought leadership, and we put out a report on the activity that we had been seeing. And we were then approached by some folks at Cyber Command to better understand that. And I think at the time, people had thought of, then it was called disinformation. Now it's kind of known as influence operations, but they sort of thought of it as in these wartime analogies, like here's the village, here are the trolls lined up on the hillside, and there's like this fusillade of disinformation just sort of being thrown at the village, like cruise missiles or something, or heavy artillery. And what we found was actually that it's really more of like drug trafficking, right? Like
Wow.
they go down into the village and they find legitimate supporters and they pass that information. And that's what was really interesting to me. And that was interesting to them because they were looking for ways to understand it so they could obviously disrupt it. And made a lot of good friends there and continue to talk to some of those individuals. And as part of that work, we were also asked to come in and talk to the Congressional Cyber Caucus, which was, I will say, kind of inspiring. I think at the time,
Really?
yes, at the time, a very fractious political environment, a lot of political theater. It's one thing to see them go back and forth in the press, but when you're talking to the caucus, a lot of them are the staffers. These are the people who write the bills, who brief senators and members of Congress. And Republican, Democrat alike, sitting in this room asking very detailed questions, very nuanced questions, and they all go and hang out at the bar afterwards. So it was really interesting to see like how much cohesion there was around that issue, even though it may not have looked like that in the popular media.
Do you think Congress has an understanding of the risks, the cyber risks our nation faces?
I think some of them do, and I think that's increasing. So I'm sure we'll get to this, but when the Congressional AI Caucus was started, for example, it
Yeah.
was like a dozen people, and it has grown considerably. And I think that there is a real appetite to learn these things. And I think, especially after the rather embarrassing social media congressional hearings, the big tech hearings, where it was just very clear that elected members do not really understand how basics of even the internet works, that there was a very big perceived need for that education. And I think anything can be politicized, but I think behind the scenes, the staffers are really hungering and seeking out that knowledge. And also, to be fair, they are recruiting SMEs in those categories, right? Like some senators will have, a security advisor to them inside their office.
That's good to know because we see it. We've seen it in some of the work with in the energy sector that are, and it's well known. There are all vulnerabilities with our
Mm-hmm.
grid, and there are things that are very hard to patch, and there's things that could be readily be done. In the readily to be done, it often seems a lot of times there's inaction because of politicization, if
Mm-hmm.
that's a word, right? But it's good to get a confirmation here that maybe there are people paying attention and things will change.
I think with the elevation of things like CISA and coordination with the FBI, it's getting a lot better. And I would say to listeners, again, you sort of see one face of it, which is the external political theater, but behind the scenes, especially with lifelong civil servants, people go in with a very ardent sense of service. And there are a lot of dedicated people in there who are really trying to help.
So switching gears here a little bit, you have two podcasts. First
Yes.
Watch, Bare Knuckles, and Brass Tacks. What's the story behind them? What are you doing? What's your work entail there?
Yeah. So for First Watch, that was started. We were a security startup, and it was a chance to engage in conversations that were important to our work, which was maybe a bit niche and less known in terms of an established category, right? Like we weren't like an EDR provider, or we weren't like a CASB provider where you have, a pretty big definition. But it was
Yeah.
also a chance to have conversations and talk to different kinds of people, right? Not just security leaders. We talk to policymakers. We talk to newcomers who are just starting in the field and getting that journey story so that other people can understand how you get into cyber. Of late, I've talked with a number of people who've made career switches, from TV producer to pen tester, or from gym owner to SOC analyst. And that's been also rewarding to just get those stories out there so people know. I mean, as we all know, we need more talent. And I would like to demystify the fact that, you don't have to come in as like a hard coder um, into this industry.
Yeah, and there's a lot of strength with that diversity of people that are coming into cybersecurity because it's bringing in very different viewpoints,
For
and
sure.
it's illuminating problems in a different way uh,
Yeah.
because
I talked
people
I
have.
talked with a CISO who said the best SOC analyst he ever had was actually a history major, because he suspected that person's training had made them very good at pattern recognition, right? Like looking through reams of text and trying to find patterns. That was a skill set that would have been hard to train from a 101 level.
Oh, absolutely. I'm waiting. I have not yet had a guest on that came over from psychology. And I
Oh yeah.
really think and this one I bring up because it's been something that I've been pushing out there, that we often focus so much on mitigation, on defense,
Hmm.
but really if we're going to make an honest attempt at being disruptive in this cat and mouse game, we really have to get in the mind of our adversary as well,
Yeah.
and right, and understanding their motivations, what drives them, what's going on over there, to me is foundational in developing strategies that are more proactive, that are not the obvious let's hack back, but two people can play mind games. It's just a question of understanding how well you understand your adversary, right, to be able to do
Yeah,
it.
for sure. And then to return to your question, the other podcast, which is called Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks, is more of a
Yeah.
passion project that is
Oh,
outside the purview of working life. That was started over a conversation. So I met a uh, a CISO named George Alcora at Black Hat last year, and
okay.
he and I have similar views on some of the bad practices that have developed between vendors and customers. And I pitched him the idea. I was like, "You're George on the CISO side. I'm George on the vendor side. This podcast writes itself." And so every week we call it Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks because Bare Knuckles is really just us letting loose some steam. There's an explicit rating on the podcast for a reason, and breaking down some bad practices. But then the brass tacks is like, well, let's not just admire the problem. Let's really try to offer a solution. And we've been surprised at the reception to it, especially since there's little to no marketing effort behind it because it's just a side project for both of us.
Oh, you know what? So you gotta illuminate us here a little bit. Give us some of the learnings on the bad practices that happen between vendors and clients. Yeah.
Well, yeah, good question. So let me back up a little bit. As I said before, I worked at an agency and we did a lot of B2B marketing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the practices that were around traditional B2B marketing, I mean, go as far back as selling printers like door to door, sort of trickled down, but into like massive scale and automation. So a lot of technology just gave us really fast ways to do bad things faster.
I
So
love that.
yeah, so so the common B2B sales tactic is to just work this numbers game of like leads, cold calls, emails, and just like it's a bet of percentages, right? It's like, okay, well, if I send 3,000 emails, all I need is like 10% to like open it, and they just keep working the numbers down.
Wow, I'm
But
told our marketing company once told us 1% is a fantastic response rate. And I'm like, all
yeah,
right, so then we're just spamming the shit out of everybody. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have said
100%,
that. Yeah, if
100%.
at that point nobody, probably not even, like, I get thousands of emails a day, man. I don't even open them anymore. I just
Yeah.
deep six.
Yeah. Well, and so let's like stand back, right? And kind of step out of the stream, out of the inertia, and think, does that make us any safer if there's this trust divide between buyers and vendors? Like, there are buyers who legitimately are thinking like, I'm not really happy with the solution. I need to look for a replacement. Or, oh, we moved from on-prem into cloud, therefore we need this new capability. But like, what is the trust if I, the marketer or the vendor, am just treating you as a number, right? You're like one lead in this giant bucket, and we're just going to either spam you by phone or we're going to spam you by email, and just like hope to, I don't know, bludgeon you into submission for a demo, and then maybe at least, I don't know. It's not a model that is sustainable given the number of vendors coming online, and it's not sustainable, I think, post COVID, where a lot of people are working from home and those cold calls are going to their cell phones. And I think, to be fair, the cybersecurity community is probably still processing a lot of trauma of the lift and shift to work from home and having to do a lot of extreme work under extreme circumstances. They're just not putting up with it anymore. I was telling some friends, like, I've never seen such a huge divergence between customer and solution provider as we have now. It's like, think about Coke and Pepsi. For the last 10 years, they've been buying up every brand that is not soda because the data is like, people are not drinking as much soda.
So, right.
Still got their core product. We're still going to sell Coke. We're still going to sell Pepsi, but I'm also going to sell like Honest Tea or Aquafina or whatever. That's where the margin is. But what do we do in cyber? It's like our customers saying, I'm really worried about diabetes. And we're saying, I got more sugar. And they're like, well, I'm really concerned about my diet. It's like, more sugar. Like, we just have this, like, we're talking at cross purposes, and it is, again, not making anyone any safer. So that's what we're trying to help.
See, and I'll tell you, I'm going to just speak from a personal basis. To me, a lot of those emails are just somebody, I don't even know if they're written by a human. I wonder how many people out there are just using Chat GPT to write shit.
Well, yeah, certainly now. Certainly.
Yeah, and just send more crap through the channel. But is you mentioned trust. Like, is this legit? Like, is this a bot? Like, is this even a human being? Do they even have did they even bother to research us a little bit? All our stuff's out in the public. You can find so many things. Did they spend 2 minutes to understand us? Or and it seems like we just get spammed, man, and nobody cares.
Yeah, we're entering the age of synthetic reality, so trust is going to be the number one differentiator for businesses.
So how do you do that? As a marketing, someone who's had extensive experience in it, how do you develop that trust with someone in an electronic medium where everyone's using it to spam the living daylights out of somebody else?
Yeah, I think it requires a pretty big cultural shift. You have to really go to the sales team, and marketing and sales has to work together. They cannot work at cross purposes. You can't go out with one message and sellers go out with another. And you really sit around the table and you're like, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to focus on the companies that we think are a higher intent to buy. We're not just going to go, here's a list of companies in a spreadsheet, hit them all. We have certain technologies that we can use to see, like, oh, are they searching for these terms? Where do we judge them in the research process? Let's focus our energies there, which is more efficient. And then when you do that outreach, really teaching your teams to understand the business, like the vulnerabilities or the risks, I should say, that, for example, a software company is facing are fundamentally different in terms of their environment than, say, like a manufacturing company, right? That has like a hard infrastructure, factories that needs things like OT and ICS controls. So just being able to like batch your research and understand that, and also work through the channel, work through partners who are already embedded there to build that trust. That's what you have to rally around. And it's really hard because you could be doing that and then you can look over your shoulder and say, but our competitors are just, we see them going to like every conference and they're doing all these things. And it's very tempting. There's a lot of cultural inertia, and you just have to have these principles and you kind of have to stand by them and work inside them. But it can be very tricky for marketing teams. I do feel that sympathy, that there's that pressure, but it leads to a lot of thrash. It leads to a lot of like pivoting.
So, okay, I guess this sets up in this age of AI that we're coming into.
Yes.
Right? And the resulting automations that are taking place. And now you're describing a cultural change. I would think that's you're really trying to swim upstream then, because the temptation is going to be, let's just use the AI and have it, why doesn't it just research the companies and come up with a subject line and write a note? No one will read it before it even goes out to see if there's any context to it, but let's just have it do that. It'll be more efficient and we can hit a lot more people versus the old way, right? Which was you actually put some time in before you sent a meeting request to an executive.
Yeah, there's a bit of a paradox at play here. Yes, you're right in terms of being able to do the research. I do think of some of these models as being more efficient data processors than they are necessarily generators. So, for example, asking ChatGPT or Hugging Face Chat or whatever to process like a 10K filing might get you to the nuggets that you need to glom onto as a seller faster than, just write me a generic email, right? Because then you just sort of are doing the same thing as everybody else. But if you can get that competitive edge, it's how you apply that technology. But the paradox is I do believe that more human interaction is going to build that trust. Like you might see more emphasis on spend for local conferences. Think of like Rocky Mountain Conference, like getting local and getting face-to-face and establishing that rapport and understanding people rather than sort of the spray and pray. So I think it may require, and I'm not there yet, but it may require a restructuring of how sales and marketing teams work on the ground. But I do believe those face-to-face interactions are going to make all the difference.
And they always have.
Exactly. Right. I say paradox because that feels a little bit like going back and knocking on the door to sell printers, right?
Right. Exactly. And the idea now, well, in the last 2 decades almost, has been, let's automate as much as possible, create the volumes, and just rely on statistical, the law of averages that says X number of people are going to click this thing. And
yeah,
it's the Capital One model. They pioneered the sign up for a credit card.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I would say to anyone who's listening from the marketing and vendor side. There are two forces at work. One, your customers talk to one another, right? So that the terrible feeling that my co-host, the other George, has, like he has shown me his inbox where he's got 60 emails from the same vendor in 3 months' time. He's telling all of his friends, like, I will never do business with this company because it's abusive. And that rep has no idea. The metrics that they may get is like, oh, George is not opening my emails. I should send more. What he doesn't know, or she doesn't know, is that they've effectively torched their entire territory because he's already talking to all of his CISO friends, right? And this exists. We know they have these collective Slack channels. So I don't know if it's really worth it or sustainable in the long run to do that, because once you get that bad rap, I mean, that's your entire business in terms of the trust. The second force at work is, and I've said this before, if you want to apply these new transformable technologies to just do the status quo cheaper, that is, and I will say it for the people in the back, the dumbest application of that technology. Like, why would you not want to leapfrog where you are now and kind of unlock that excellence rather than just like write stupid emails faster, right? You said 1%. Are we going to fight over the marginal gains of like, or are we going to cheer for 1.2% open rate? Or it's like,
I hate to say, but there's a huge crowd that would cheer for that 1.2%, right?
Yeah, and that's why I'm encouraging people to like step back and kind of like look at the madness and say like, is this a sustainable business model over time?
Yeah, it's gonna. It'll be a monumental cultural change because there's so many metrics that are established around this that become people's compensation and their bonuses and their effectiveness. I mean,
we are living through a generational shift. I mean, a lot of leaders now who are using those metrics and those models came up through the old B2B model, and you're sort of either open to the shift or you're not. And, there's little that I personally can do about that. But I will tell you, after interviewing people, we are seeing a difference. Like we have a guest coming on soon who is a BDR who was referred to us by a CISO who said like, look, I write 12 emails a week and I get like 9 meetings. I mean, who wouldn't want that conversion rate versus I automated 3,000 emails and I got 2 meetings. And meanwhile, our email servers got blocked by the others.
Well, you know what, George? I bet you that BDR, first of all, has knowledge about what they're selling, right? Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that they're probably not just out of college in their first sales gig cutting their teeth. That person must have some knowledge of whatever. If they're selling security, it's about security. Yeah. And they must know a little bit about how the business works.
Well, and as we said at the beginning, I think this is an industry that rewards curiosity. If you come in here for the paycheck and not wanting to know more, I mean, you'll probably churn out pretty fast.
Yeah. That's the only way you can get those kinds of results is, to build something that might resonate with the prospect that's based on an actual problem that they might have. So,
for sure.